probably would be a train, and leave their car behind and get on.
Nice.
A good example of that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Orange Line in the Valley.
Yeah.
They built that, and right now it's getting about 20,000 passengers a day, down from about 28 before the economy crashed. So they were doing about 28,000 people taking the train, taking that bus, and either getting off somewhere and going to work, or taking it down to the Red Line and taking the Red Line downtown. And that's 28,000 people a day at its height a couple of years ago. That's a lot of cars.
Yeah, it's
That's a lot of
28,000
cars.
cars.
Excuse me.
I read somewhere that LA County has the largest natural gas alternative fuel bus line in the country.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, take advantage of compact building design. So like I was saying, you have village commercial, these smaller areas, and then you have what's called community commercial, which would be much, the bigger sort of big box kind of stores. And we have some examples. So here's an example of what we're talking about with new urbanism. You have housing, you have cafes, and this is a perfect picture, but you can see how they're mixing their uses. They're mixing restaurants and housing, they're mixing storefronts and housing. Here's another one. Again, see how the road is narrower. There's still parking, there's still cars, but the traffic's slower, and there might be a parking lot one or more parking lots where people can park their cars and then walk in the village, as it were, instead of having to drive from one end of the village, driving back and forth from each individual store. Another example. People walking, again, narrow streets, storefronts below, high-rise, buildings with apartments above. And one more village, again, narrow streets, parking for cars, but lots of retail, and then you see there's upper residential. Okay, so let me move my little notes along here. Auto-dependence results from segmentation, and we talked about Euclidean zoning. Segmentation of residential, commercial, industrial uses. So what we're trying to, you lose community vitality, you're making neighborhoods unwelcoming to pedestrians and bicyclists, and you're increasing traffic because you can't do anything except getting in the car to get anywhere. So the whole point of a traditional neighborhood development is reduce the number of external trips and thus vehicle miles traveled, and the number is about 15%. Through provision of commercial, recreational, and other resident-oriented destinations within the walkable community. Right, I think we've covered all that. Right, so you've got moderate to higher density developments as opposed to the spread out kind of sprawl we've talked about. And now we're talking about transit-oriented development, which is taking your traditional neighborhood, new urbanist developments, and linking them. Usually with some kind of either like a dedicated bus line, like an Orange Line, or a subway, or some kind of trolley or train system, like a Metro Link kind of system. Okay, so if you have moderate to higher density development within an easy walk of a major transit stop, and you have your housing, you have your employment, your shopping, all within a pedestrian level of travel, and then the transit-oriented development, the trains can actually tie these things all together. So there you go. So how do you go about this? First, you have to organize growth on a regional level. We talked about SCAG. We talked about these regional organizations that the state has now mandated, and that all these all the local governments have to be a part of it. They're required to be a part of it. We talked some of the stuff we talked about, placing commercial and civic uses within walking distance, for pedestrian-friendly streets, mixed housing, densities and costs. So it's not that we're not going to have single-family homes anymore, but we're giving people multiple choices. Not everyone is going to live in a single-family house. Not everyone's going to live in an apartment building that's not near the stores. We're going to try to bring these things together in a way that is much more non-auto-centric, would probably be a way to put it. And density allows us to preserve habitats, riparian zones, and high-quality open spaces because we're not filling it with houses and Costco's and Walmarts. Public spaces are the focus of building orientation. Notice some of those pictures I showed you earlier. All the buildings are right on the sidewalk. There's no vast acreage of blacktop between you and the store. You're walking along, the storefront is right there in front of you on the sidewalk. You can walk right into the store. You don't have to take your life into your hands walking through a parking lot. Parking lots can be behind the buildings as opposed to being in the front of the building. And then, of course, encouraging infill and redevelopment along the transit corridors. So you know where your trains are going to be because they go in one place. And so you want to build where those trains are going to be. That's going to get people to use those rail lines. So here's an example. Puget Sound in the state of Washington. You have a 4-county region: King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Thurston. And these are the major cities in each of those counties. And what was going on in Washington is that, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Puget Sound, you have this fabulous waterway and peninsulas, and you have this urban core right here, and then you have a lot of rural and agricultural and forest right outside here. And what's happening is that, like in every other American city, people were hitting the boundaries, and they were trying to get out. And they were eating up agricultural space, and they were eating up forest lands, and this was generally considered a bad thing. And so what they did is that they created what we're calling here tonight traditional neighborhoods. And you have these red circles, and they said these are going to be our core places. We're going to do infill. We're going to create these walkable and biking communities where there's shopping and people can work and live in the same places. And people flock to them. People flocked to them, and they got the density they were looking for. And what happened was, once they got the density they were looking for in these areas, lo and behold, let's build a train and a station with all those spaces, because the density is there to justify the train. Instead of building the train and saying, you know, they'll come, what you do is you create the environment that allows people to live in that kind of space, and then you can put the train in because it's a natural addition to what you've already done. And this has been a tremendous success. So moving to renewable energy. All right. Slide 54, guys.
Out of how many?
7. Okay, so renewable energy and green building. Well, that would be nice. So, collection of land uses, building designs, construction strategies, neighborhood developments, reducing the environmental impacts. So, we have economic benefits, reduced energy consumption, protection of ecosystems. It's better for the people's health, and it ties into the smart growth and new urbanism we've already covered. So, here we go. Buildings in the U.S. account for 39% of total energy in the United States is used in buildings. 12% of water consumption, 68% of total electricity consumption, 38% of greenhouse gas emissions, all comes from buildings in the United States. 72% of all electricity generated and account for 80% of all electricity expenditures. Buildings in the U.S. emitted 630 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, equal to the combined emissions of the UK, France, and Japan. So, boy, they're smoking.
Define a building.
I'm sorry?
Can you define a building? Because I see buildings emitting. It's just a commercial property.
With nobody in it? With people doing stuff in it?
Well, presumably there's people in it, they wouldn't be heating it.
Okay, so you're talking about the heating.
We're talking about operating. The building doesn't just...
Operating.
Yeah,
Right.
Operating the building. It uses electricity, it creates gases. The building itself may not really create a lot of gases, but what it does is, certainly the heating, the equipment in the building does, but then you have people who have to drive to the building, people who drive away from the building.
Okay.
It's a cumulative effect.
Okay.
Okay, green buildings. are built to efficiently use land and energy, conserve water, improve indoor and outdoor air quality, conserve resources, and increase the use of recycled materials, all of which leads to reduced operating costs and enhance the overall value of such buildings. So what are we talking about? The environmental benefits of green buildings. They enhance and protect biodiversity because they use fewer resources. They typically incorporate clean, renewable forms of energy and use less energy overall, reducing gases. They reduce waste streams and conserve natural resources. It's a little redundant. Economic benefits. Reduced operating costs lead to a better return on investment and overall building value. Recoup greater cost through there's no question it costs more to build a green building than to build a standard building. That the difference is dropping and has been dropping rapidly for a number of years. It's getting closer and closer to even. So it just at this point, frankly, your ROI on building a green building, and I will get to that, makes it worth your while. So you recoup your losses, your greater upfront costs through lower operating costs, lower electricity, heating, cooling, etc. As much as 10 times the initial investment over a 20-year lifespan of the building. Economic benefits gained through health benefits, increased productivity, reduced absenteeism, positive impacts on employee recruiting, because particularly with the younger workforce coming in, these people care about these things, and they want to work in places that are, quote, cool to work in. And this is one of those issues. So what are we coming at? So, common green building practices, siting the building. Taking advantage of mass transit or placed within a master plan of the community. Brownfield sites that are cleaned up can be reused. Existing landscaping and natural features of the site are retained. Plants and other vegetation are selected for low water needs, low pesticide needs, etc. Recycled content, building and paving materials are used. Landscape is designed to detain or retain water, so the stress on the stormwater system is reduced. And actually, we talked a little bit about rainwater capture. The cost savings can be enormous. Right. Roof and non-roof surface is designed to minimize the heat island effect, and that actually cools the entire urban area if you have enough buildings that way. And night sky pollution is also reduced, which I'm not sure is a key concern, but is a concern for a lot of people. Energy efficiency, natural lighting, and minimization of need for electricity. High efficiency lighting with lighting controls also saves electricity. Task lighting instead of having general overhead lighting. You're much better off running a desk lamp than you are running a whole ceiling full of lights. Properly sized energy efficient heating and cooling systems. Light colors are used for roofing. We talked a little bit about that in the last slide. High R value wall and ceiling insulation, minimal glass on the east and west exposures. Electric loads from lighting equipment and appliances are minimized. Alternative energy sources and fuel cells. Computer modeling to optimize the design of the lighting and electrical and mechanical systems so that you're literally, you optimize with computers so you can minimize the level of equipment that's needed. You don't have to build in as much redundancy. Materials efficiencies. Sustainable construction materials, reused and recycled content, zero or low off-gassing or harmful air emissions, sustainable harvested materials, dimensional planning and other material efficiency